Welcome back to World History Explored. This is your host, Adam Zane, and today we're journeying to one of South America's most fascinating, yet often overlooked nations. We're heading to the emerald heart of the Atlantic coast, to a land where mighty rivers carve through endless rainforest, where cultures from 5 continents have merged into something entirely unique, and where the echoes of empires, enslavement, and revolution still resonate through modern streets. This is a country born from the collision of indigenous wisdom, European ambition, African resilience, and Asian determination. A nation whose people rose from the darkest chapters of colonialism to build one of the fastest-growing economies on Earth. Before we continue, if you love discovering nations with deep, untold histories, please hit that like button, subscribe to World History Explored, and share this video. Your support helps us keep bringing these forgotten stories to light. This is Guyana, a name meaning land of many waters. History flows through this country like its great rivers, from the paddles of the Arawaks, through the chains of sugar plantations, past the ballot boxes of hard-won democracy, to the engines of offshore oil rigs that promise to reshape everything. Let's explore the complete history of Guyana, from 1498 to 2024. The First Peoples, guardians of the rivers. Long before any European ship appeared on the horizon, the territory we know today was home to indigenous nations who had lived here for thousands of years. The Arawak, Carib, Akawayo, Wapishana, and Wai peoples built thriving riverine civilizations based on cassava farming, fishing, and extensive trade networks that connected the Caribbean islands to the Amazon basin. These were organized societies with complex social structures, spiritual traditions, and intimate knowledge of one of Earth's most biodiverse regions. To these peoples, the forest was not wilderness to be tamed, but a living entity to be respected. The rivers were sacred lifelines connecting communities and generations. The Arawaks, peaceful traders and farmers, dominated the coastal regions. The Caribs, renowned warriors and navigators, controlled the interior waterways. Their canoes carried more than goods. They carried oral histories passed down through countless generations. The land had no borders, only waterways that connected villages in a web of relationships and shared ceremony. The Kayatour Falls was a sacred site where the physical and spiritual worlds touched. Ancient rock paintings told stories of creation and the eternal cycles of nature. That timeless balance would soon face its greatest test. Sails appearing on the horizon, carrying men with strange weapons and an insatiable hunger for gold and land. Empires and sugar. The bitter harvest. 1498 to 1834. In 1498, Christopher Columbus reached the Guiana coast during his third voyage, claiming it for Spain. But Spain, focused on the silver of Peru and gold of Mexico, saw little interest in these swampy, mosquito-ridden coasts. For over a century, the indigenous peoples remained largely undisturbed. That changed when the Dutch arrived in the early 1600s. The Dutch West India Company established fortified trading posts along the Essequibo, Demerara, and Berbice rivers. Using canal systems and dikes learned from keeping the North Sea at bay, they drained coastal swamps and created farmland. To work that land, they imported thousands of enslaved Africans. Sugar became the colony's lifeblood. The coast glittered with plantations where enslaved people worked under brutal conditions. The wealth generated flowed to Amsterdam, building merchant palaces, while those who produced it lived in chains. But resistance burned bright. Inland, communities of Maroons escaped enslaved people, established free villages, and fought colonial militias, preserving African traditions and serving as beacons of hope. The most famous resistance came in 1763, when Cuffy led a massive rebellion in Berbice. For over a year, his forces controlled much of the colony before being defeated. His courage became legendary, eventually earning him the title of Guyana's national hero. During the Napoleonic Wars, Britain seized these colonies. The Treaty of London in 1814 formally transferred them to British control. By 1831, they were merged as British Guiana. 3 years later came August 1st, 1834, the abolition of slavery throughout the British Empire. About 80,000 Africans in British Guiana were freed. Churches rang with celebration, but emancipation brought new hardships. Freed Africans wanted nothing to do with the plantations that had been their prisons. Plantation owners, desperate for labor, turned to indentured servitude. Between 1838 and 1917, some 240,000 Indians crossed the ocean from British India, signing contracts that promised wages but often delivered little more than another form of bondage. They came from Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and other regions, bringing Hindi, Bhojpuri, saris and dhoti, curry and roti, Hindu temples and Muslim mosques. The festival lights of Diwali now glowed alongside Christian crosses and African spiritual practices. Chinese and Portuguese indentured laborers followed. The Guyana that emerged was unlike anywhere else, a South American nation where curry was as common as Caribbean spices, where mosques and mandirs stood beside churches, where multiple languages echoed through marketplaces. Colonial society and resistance, seeds of freedom, 1834 to 1949. Freedom did not bring equality. The colonial system adapted rather than disappeared. Africans were pushed into small coastal villages or marginal farms. Indians remained bound to sugar estates by contracts and debt. The British colonial administration used race and religion to divide workers, ensuring no united opposition could threaten their control. Yet beneath the surface, a distinct Guyanese identity began to form. Cricket clubs became spaces where young men from different backgrounds competed and bonded. Schools provided education that sparked political consciousness. Village gathering places became informal parliaments where workers debated shared injustices. By the early 1900s, educated Guyanese began demanding reform. Trade unions emerged, organizing dock workers and sugar workers. Newspapers became platforms for voices challenging colonial authority and imagining self-government. This rising consciousness produced two figures who would define modern Guyana: Cheddi Jagan and Forbes Burnham. Both brilliant, both committed to ending colonial rule, but their alliance would prove both powerful and fragile. Freedom and the Cold War. Independence under fire. 1950 to 1966. In 1950, Cheddi Jagan, a socialist-minded dentist of Indian descent, and Forbes Burnham, a charismatic Afro-Guyanese lawyer, founded the People's Progressive Party, the PPP. Their vision was radical, a unified movement of workers across racial lines demanding independence and social transformation. Land reform, free education, nationalization of key industries. The PPP's landslide victory in 1953 sent shockwaves through London and Washington. This was the height of the Cold War. Britain and the United States saw Jagan's Marxist rhetoric as a potential Soviet beachhead in the Western Hemisphere. Within 133 days, Britain suspended the Constitution, sent troops to occupy Georgetown, and removed the elected government. It was a constitutional coup. The message was clear: colonized peoples could have democracy only if they voted the right way. The aftermath shattered Jagan and Burnham's alliance, increasingly along ethnic fault lines. Jagan's PPP retained support among Indo-Guyanese, particularly rural sugar workers. Burnham's new People's National Congress attracted primarily Afro-Guyanese urban workers. Violence erupted. Strikes paralyzed Georgetown. The 1962 to 1964 period saw communal riots that killed over 170 people. Much of this was fueled by covert foreign intervention. The CIA funded anti-Jagan forces, while Cuba supported the PPP. Despite the chaos, independence endured as a goal. After complex negotiations, a path forward emerged. On May 26, 1966, as thousands gathered in Georgetown, the Union Jack was lowered and the golden arrowhead flag rose. Forbes Burnham became Prime Minister of independent Guyana. Experiment and survival. The Burnham years, 1966 to 1992. Burnham's government embraced socialist self-reliance. He declared Guyana a cooperative republic and pursued aggressive nationalization, taking control of bauxite, sugar estates, and other key sectors. He restricted imports, promoted local production, and built alliances with Cuba, North Korea, and African liberation movements. Internationally, Guyana punched above its weight. Burnham became a respected voice in the non-aligned movement and supported anti-apartheid struggles. Georgetown hosted important summits, but at home, the experiment struggled. Nationalized industries suffered from mismanagement and corruption. Import restrictions meant scarcity. Food lines grew longer. Political opposition was suppressed. Elections rigged, and press freedom eroded. Thousands of educated Guyanese emigrated to the United States, Canada, and Britain, creating a diaspora that today outnumbers the population remaining in Guyana. Yet Burnham also fostered cultural pride, free education through university, and the conviction that Guyana would chart its own destiny. When Burnham died suddenly in 1985, his successor Desmond Hoyt began cautiously opening the economy, restoring press freedoms, and repairing international relations. The Soviet collapse removed ideological justification for authoritarianism. By 1992, under international oversight, Guyana held its first genuinely free election in decades. The PPP returned to power, and Cheddi Jagan, overthrown as a radical in 1953, became president at age 74. His victory completed the independence struggle, freedom not just from empire, but from authoritarian rule. After Jagan's death in 1997, his wife Janet Jagan became president, making her South America's first female head of state. Borders, oil, and transformation. The new Guyana, 1992 to 2024. As democracy matured, an old dispute returned, the Essequibo question. Venezuela had long claimed 2/3 of Guyana's territory, arguing that an 1899 Paris arbitration was unjust. For decades, this remained a diplomatic irritant. Everything changed in 2015 when ExxonMobil announced the discovery of vast offshore oil reserves in the Stabroek Block. Subsequent discoveries revealed more than 11 billion barrels of recoverable oil. Overnight, Guyana transformed from one of South America's poorest nations into its fastest-growing economy, with growth rates exceeding 60% in peak years. By 2023, production surpassed 600,000 barrels per day. President Irfan Ali and Vice President Bharat Jagdeo promised to invest oil revenues in infrastructure, housing, education, and healthcare. A sovereign wealth fund was established to prevent the resource curse. But Venezuela, facing economic catastrophe, reacted aggressively. President Maduro revived territorial claims, held a 2023 referendum to annex Essequibo, and began issuing licenses in disputed waters. Guyana appealed to the International Court of Justice, which confirmed its jurisdiction. The dispute became one of Latin America's most dangerous flashpoints. At home, Guyana grappled with sudden wealth. Georgetown's skyline changed as glass towers rose beside colonial buildings. Roads were paved, reaching villages once isolated by rainforest. Jobs exploded, attracting workers from across the Caribbean. Yet inequality persisted. Indigenous peoples pressed for meaningful consultation and fair sharing. Environmentalists warned of ecological risks in a nation hosting significant tropical rainforest, part of Earth's green lungs. Could Guyana develop oil wealth while protecting natural wealth that might prove more valuable in a warming world? Guyana today and tomorrow. Promise and peril. 2024 and beyond. In 2024, Guyana stands at a crossroads between past and promise. Its population of roughly 800,000, descendants of Africans, Indians, Amerindians, Chinese, Portuguese, and Europeans, forms one of the world's most ethnically diverse societies. That diversity remains both the nation's greatest strength and its most persistent challenge. Ethnic voting patterns still dominate, but intermarriage increases. Younger generations mix more freely, and a genuinely Guyanese identity strengthens. In Georgetown, colonial gingerbread houses stand beside glass towers funded by oil money. Stabroek Market, built in 1881, still bustles with vendors speaking half a dozen languages. Roads penetrate deep into the interior. Internet reaches villages that lacked electricity a generation ago. The government pledged carbon-neutral growth, protecting vast forests while developing oil. International buyers pay for forest carbon credits. Whether these promises translate into practice remains to be seen. The Kayatur Falls still thunder as they did before Columbus, before slavery, before oil. a 741-foot drop, reminding every visitor that Guyana's natural wealth preceded and may outlast its oil boom. Conclusion: from rivers to rigs. And that is the epic story of Guyana, a nation where every river carries the memory of indigenous canoes. Every field of sugarcane remembers the blood and sweat of the enslaved and indentured, and every barrel of oil represents both promise and risk. This is a country that survived everything history could throw at it: conquest, slavery, indenture, colonialism, authoritarian rule, and economic collapse. Its people, drawn from 5 continents, forged something unique: a South American nation that's also Caribbean, a developing country suddenly wealthy, a place where ancient rainforest meets cutting-edge technology. So what do you think? Can Guyana balance heritage with newfound prosperity? Can oil wealth build lasting institutions or fuel corruption? Can ethnic diversity become genuine unity? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We read them all and love hearing different perspectives. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please like this video, share it with anyone who loves history and geography, and subscribe to World History Explored, where geography meets destiny and forgotten stories find their voice. Join our growing community of explorers and history enthusiasts from around the globe. Your support makes this possible. Until next time, I'm Adam Zane, and remember, behind every border, every empire, and every drop of oil lies 1,000 years of human history, waiting to be explored. Keep questioning, keep learning, keep exploring.